Chapter 18 Therapeutic Modalities. The after effects of the mind control carried out by the abductors is the most difficult symptom to work with. The compartmentalized and dissociated memories of alien encounters are not necessarily trauma-induced, but the amnesia is a factor in mitigating post-traumatic stress, mainly because the masking programs block recall. The only way to overcome these multifarious programs is to chip away at the conditioning until the abductee begins to exhibit sufficient recall and support to cope on their own. Repressed memories of mental and physical trauma associated with the abduction experience manifest themselves in a myriad of ways and, at times, when they are least expected. The alien technology is very powerful. Military brainwashing techniques pale by comparison. But once the aliens have conducted their experiments, the subject is tossed back into our cultural ocean, like a fish. Images, first seen in the alien clinical setting, are repressed by alien mind control and other techniques. But the normal human mind is built to remember, and many abductees have visions, which often pop up in grotesque forms. This gives the therapist a real challenge. The images are not always directly reflective of the traumatic events, but are instead symbolic, like generalized phobias and dream images. For example, abductees may show fear of dark-eyed animals and spiders, when in fact they are morbidly afraid of gray aliens. Normal phobias can usually be treated with classical methodologies, but alien abduction therapeutic strategies require an additional twist. The feared object seems nonsensical to the uninformed therapist, and the therapist tends to steer the victim away from the idea that they might have been abducted and towards something more traditional, such as fear of abandonment. Mama took my teddy bear away. The most common familial deformity is the mutual dysfunctional unit, i.e., a married couple with dysfunctional traits before they were abducted, made worse by the abduction. The case studies tend to depict the aliens as looking for already weakened marriages, and easily manipulated people because they are easier to exploit, easier to flatter and easier to brainwash. Hence, these people make the perfect puppets to carry out a clandestine alien agenda. Dysfunctionality, as I use it here and elsewhere in this book, can be defined as any behavior that results in an unhealthy relationship. Secret-keeping behavior and the covert no-talk rule, identical to the shibboleth invoked by child molesters, forces the abductee to live a false double life, which, in and of itself, is dysfunctional and prone to all manner of mental injury, especially stress and free-floating anxiety. The avoidance of open and honest communication and a natural inclination to distrust in one's own feelings, often thrusts abductees into habitually negative social patterns. They may see foreboding trouble in casual contacts, even in social contracts, as seemingly trouble-free as going to the grocery store or filling up a car with gas. Many abductees seem beaten and are downright paranoid. In some cases it is justified, especially if they really are being harassed or under surveillance by government agencies, but in most cases the clinical paranoia can be traced to the effects of post-traumatic stress, as often observed in survivors of wars, such as Vietnam veterans. Many abductees have coped quite well considering the forces against them. I do not want to give the impression that all abductees are totally dysfunctional, but, in my opinion, the denial and enforced secrecy of these issues leads to advancing family problems and must be dealt with before the subject can practice true insight. The abduction process preys upon the ease of manipulability already available in dysfunctional families. These self-same families may be specific bloodlines of genetically important material to the aliens. Nonetheless, I believe they are being exploited into a more pliable resource for alien usage. Contrary to a growing stereotype, most abductees have not undergone hypnosis to recover their memories of alien encounters. Few can afford professional counseling or hypnosis, and, even if they can, they usually avoid it because of the mainstream psychological and medical opinions against hypnosis currently prevalent. Quite frankly, the medical and psychological profession is woefully uninformed about the abduction syndrome. Many abductees seek group help because they have already been through the shrink mill or sense that normal therapeutics can't help them. I think, for this reason, abductee support groups are springing up in many areas of the world. The one symptom cluster that is common for abductees is codependency within love relationships. This term was first coined to describe relating patterns of spouses or close family members of alcoholics, substance abusers or child abusers, but has now been generalized to apply to anyone who loses self-esteem in a relationship due to the dominance needs of one or both parties. The hallmark of codependent behavior is the maintenance of the status quo in addictive or even abusive patterns. This can be any pattern that effectively keeps the dysfunctional behavior going while, at the same time, suppressing all attempts to make positive changes. This persistence of negativity is highly destructive and is usually acted out in ways that perpetuate more family problems. A perfect target for the aliens. Codependent persons live their life as if they were walking on eggshells. They live with a constant fear or unconscious anxiety not to rock the boat or confront core issues, especially those which will elicit strong emotions, admission of wrongs, or change the equilibrium of the relationship, however false, i.e., bad love bites at UPS. The codependent person may go to great lengths to please others to avoid feelings of rejection and abandonment. Peer pressure is easily succumbed to, especially negative peer pressure. The abductee may join a cult, like Heaven's Gate, and may become so habituated to defending the messianic dream that the person would rather die and hurt others than get well or hurt another member of the cult. They see wellness as defined by the non-abductee community as a complete impossibility. In therapy, the subject needs to be confronted with their incongruent behavior. This thematic resistance to help can be addressed to abductees, who enter into dysfunctional relationships that maintain the denial of abduction issues. I've seen a higher than average number of female abductees enter into controlling and abusive marriages. Here again we see denial at work because the spouse usually makes a point of disparaging the abductee, especially if they make efforts toward healing and growth. In an unhealthy marriage, the abductee need not see or cope with the issues of the abduction. Their attention and energy is drawn to relationship issues and repetitive crises instead. The abductee can avoid the core abduction-related issues by staying distracted in a bad relationship. But to be resolved, the dark inner truth of their experience centers on the begging need to be heard and healed in a forgiving manner, but they rarely see this as long as they remain in their poor relationships. As stated earlier, unhealthy coping skills may involve addictions of various types. Addictions can be the abuse of any substance, or repetitive behavior that serves to keep the person in denial of unresolved psychological issues. In this case, avoidance of abduction-related trauma, pain, terror, fear, grief, abandonment and despair of rejection. I've come across professional psychologists who claim that the majority of post-traumatic stress in abductees and dysfunctional family issues in abductees are not from alien abductions, but from other more easily explained psychological theories. That may be true in part, but in families where abductions have occurred for several generations, the denial and trauma of hidden abductions compounds and may even create the dysfunctional behaviors. This fact, and the observation that abductions associated with negative aliens increase when the emotional chaos increases, is the basis, in part, for this assumption. Resolution and healing of alien abduction-related issues can only be complete when false and misleading psychological swamp gas theories are put to rest and hopefully, disproved. In many cases, the therapeutic process extended over many years. Sometimes daily phone calls were necessary to keep the client stabilized during extreme emotional processing. Long-term aftercare is necessary for the complete recovery of the abductee, especially if reality-shattering trauma was uncovered. This occurred in the cases of Ted Rice and was written about, with great passion, by James Walden, in his book The Ultimate Alien Agenda. The main difference between alien abduction trauma and typical trauma stems from the aliens' need to track and re-abduct some abductees. The traumas with abductions continue because the abductions continue. In this context, true recovery is not possible unless abductions stop. The aliens seem to be willing to study the human subject regardless of how we feel about it. They are indifferent to us. Not only do the aliens continue to take certain individuals, but they will also act in ways to prevent the abductee from stopping abductions. Aliens do everything they can to discourage therapy, the joining of a support group and the gathering of factual information necessary to heal and empower abductees. Unless it is part of an indoctrination program serving the alien agenda. The case histories of Ted Rice, Sophia, Darlene and Angelina demonstrate the aliens' truth-detracting methods. UFO researchers, abduction therapists, psychological and medical professionals dealing with abductees often overlook this alien mind control factor. Core issues of abductees cannot fully be addressed until the control factor of the alien presence is acknowledged. This includes acquisition of evidence of alien abductions. This also explains why there is so much chaos and confusion in the UFO field. Health issues are also a frequent complaint of abductees. The most common medical anomalies are in the area of gynecological and sexual organs, allergies, skin rashes, autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue, migraines, and endocrine abnormalities. Some abductees are so affected by their health problems that they are on permanent disability, not able to work a regular job. I've encountered situations in which the abductee was suddenly struck ill as a result of alien attacks, disinformation and mind-fogging tactics. Unusual health problems such as panic attacks and anxiety, heart problems, severe back pain, migraines, nausea and extreme exhaustion have resulted from the abductee's efforts to search for the truth of their experiences. These blatant health issues and coincidental events and accidents are not simple psychological self-sabotage, but something much more revealing. The closer they get to the truth, release from their bondage to the alien control, the more the pain and punishment seems to emerge, almost as if the aliens were extracting reprisals. Success in a therapeutic fashion with abductees can be achieved if these basic steps are followed: seek counseling and support with knowledgeable sources. Prayer and meditation stop addictions and secret-keeping behavior, stop defending the aliens, get out of dysfunctional relationships, develop positive, supportive and healthy relationships, inculcate a strong love for the truth and a fighting spirit until alien programming loses its power over you. The strategies of dealing with abductees must be multidisciplinary. Not only should we act in a therapeutic capacity, but the entire field of work must thought of as ongoing spiritual warfare, a battle in which the helping party must discipline themselves like an intelligence operative. Chapter 19: Psychic Vampires. There can be no doubt that the aliens have human behavioristic targets as goals. These targets are known to us as mate selection, matters of love, romance, and matters of the soul, but I think it should be clear by this point that the aliens need to farm our emotional energy. To me it is clear that they are, as the hippies used to say, psychic vampires. They want, and if we are not careful, will get, our most important asset, our unique human creative energy, our love of life itself. Our main defense against this vampirism is self-esteem, prayer and group support, but abductees rarely seek out helping bodies simply due to the lack of professional support. If I have one message to convey, it is that anyone who even thinks they may have been abducted should seek out an information and support system as soon as possible. Spiritual warfare from the alien perspective seems to be conducted by inflicting pain on selected victims, partially to experiment and partially to puppet these souls back into society to destabilize our normally peaceful way of life. These extremes are more apparent with the reptilian abductions. Their medical warfare efforts manifest themselves as the after effects of experiments and procedures in which some type of medical manipulation, often sexual, is performed. These procedures, from what we have seen, are not always in the best interest of the abductee, but are employed according to the alien agenda. They are usually invasive, and without consent, making them a form of rape. The most common physical after effects of an abduction are bruises, cuts, scoop marks, pain, exhaustion and fatigue. In addition, latent signs occur months or weeks later in the form of gynecological and sexual problems, pregnancy, autoimmune disorders, and frequent illnesses. Rashes, burns and even symptoms of radiation poisoning have been reported. Some illnesses and medical conditions have occurred as a direct result of the victim's willingness to fight back, especially when the victim's resistance takes the form of gathering information on the alien agenda. In the cases where the aliens have not succeeded in breaking the will of the abductee, they tend to track and elongate the relationship, primarily to harass and reprogram the target victim if and when they get up the gumption to come out of the closet and protest. Alien punishment against revelation took place in the cases of Sophia and Darlene, but I have seen this halting effect in other cases. It is possible that some of these anomalous health problems are controlled by alien implants used to track victims like farm animals. Implants may employ forms of new nano-engine technology, which releases unknown drugs or chemicals into the bloodstream in a highly controlled and subclinical fashion. And the effects are sometimes indirect when, for example, the aliens reduce the victim's libidinal strength to such an extent that they can no longer derive pleasure from sex. These reprisal-like illnesses are a result of what I believe to be detracting efforts by the aliens. They have demonstrated, quite clearly, that they not only want to manipulate their victims, but are determined to avoid detection and will do anything to avoid disclosure, including assassination and the use of chemicals, or even cancer. Outright murder may be suspected in instances where the abductee was given chemicals, biological cultures, or toxins, which could lead to a slow death or a wasting away of functionality. The slower the death, the more deniable the murder is. In addition to the symptoms listed earlier, I have interviewed abductees who present with painful fibroids, adhesions and scar tissue from repeated medical procedures. In addition, abductees commonly report the rapid onset of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and severe migraines. Some of these health issues are so debilitating that the abductee is in a constant state of pain and eventual economic bondage over not being able to pay the medical bills. At least half of the abductees in my study lost or did not carry medical insurance, making the economic hardships even more painful. Many who do have insurance visit doctors to no avail since, the doctors, no matter how sincere and ethical, are baffled with their symptoms. Other examples of imposed hardships, both in the literature and in my case database, are plentiful. Surveillance is common and interference with telephone lines is almost standard. This extends to surface and electronic mail and internet activities, as well as actual physical surveillance with other high-tech equipment. This is more pronounced in victims of mind control. The government agencies involved tend to sort out the claimants. The abductees who they fear most are the credible witnesses, the unbroken, perfectly rational subjects. The broken and bogus people are no threat, but the folks who can recover, remember, and argue plausibly on television or in other media, are an irritation. The aliens, and whoever works with them, will have a hard time discrediting someone who has their wits about them and works every day at some productive vocation. About 2/3 of the people I work closely with are of this more intelligent type. This is why the constructive UFO support groups are so threatening to the powers that be. Not only are the abductees getting together, sharing valuable information, but they are getting help. Some abductees are followed by unmarked government vehicles, often plain white vans, as we noted in Suzanne's case. Quite a few abductees and researchers have reported being buzzed by black helicopters. Now lots of people see choppers every day, but seldom do they come over your house close enough to break dishes or hover outside your window and move on. This phenomenon is so common as to be almost laughable. Art Bell, the noted radio journalist and best-selling author, has been buzzed several times at his remote location near Pahrump, Nevada. Bell thinks the choppers are used for intimidation as much as for surveillance. It is as if the black helicopters are being used as warnings. My editor, who generally does not believe in UFOs, was buzzed and is on record as having the black chopper hover outside of his farmhouse window for several minutes while he was setting type for this book. This may seem even more unbelievable when we realize that up until that time, he thought of the farm as his private retreat, and he believed, due to thorough preparations, that nobody knew about its location. His comment was short: "Somebody does not want this book to come out." One other incident left a good deal of physical evidence behind. The helicopter flew so close to the home that it caused serious property damage for one abductee I corresponded with. This was not a hallucination. The chopper had flown over several times, causing the windows of the building to crack and blow out. Overt surveillance tactics are probably designed for psychological intimidation, the very definition of psychic rape, rather than to do physical harm, but they can cause mental anguish, just like a stalker can do great harm without making physical contact. The desired effect is to keep the victim in a state of fear and powerlessness. Telling people about these flybys will make the victim seem paranoid and uncredible. This partially explains the paucity of information on the real nature of the aliens and their activities, especially as we explore the relationship between the helicopter and aerial surveillance flybys. Not all of them are black or even helicopters, incidentally, and the alien agenda. The case of Mia Adams demonstrates an elaborately orchestrated bonding drama between Mia and an FBI agent, codenamed Jordan. In it we saw how truly interwoven with the aliens the government has become. Jordan experienced a love obsession, and seems to have been prepared for the meeting decades ahead of time. For many years both Mia and Jordan were surveilled by government operatives, FBI, and other clandestine groups during their relationship. If I'm right, then Jordan was parked in the FBI until the opportune moment when he would be used to court Mia. The relationship between Jordan and Mia seemed to be the key point of interest for an alien experiment involving human bonding of individuals who share synchronous energy fields and/or common genetic material. It is my opinion that human government and alien intelligences cooperated to a certain extent in this human bonding program. Admittedly, there is much debate as to the government's involvement in UFO and alien abduction matters. One camp is convinced UFOs do not exist, but that the government is in the business of making them seem real so that they can blame UFOs for all manner of black projects carried out by secret government agencies. Whatever the case may be, there appears to be a human element operating in conjunction with the UFO phenomenon. Based on what I have observed in a number of abduction reports, I think certain branches of the intelligence community are interacting on behalf of national security to prevent release of certain information. I also think that the aliens employ human operatives to maintain secrecy and provide disinformation through a variety of means which probably include but is not limited to government, military, aerospace and intelligence personnel. The idea that aliens use human operatives is a scary thought, considering the level of mind control technology they possess. Many of these humans may be nothing more than unknowing sleepers, fringe zealots, possibly even pseudo-patriots, known in spook slang as cutouts. Such was a possibility in the breakup of Suzanne's support group. I believe some of these intelligence gathering, security and warfare measures can be carried out through psychic spying or remote viewing, combined with high technology and nefarious combination. Psychological warfare tactics are evident by mind control techniques such as memory suppression and installation of false memories of the abduction, screen memories, and other forms of mnemonic manipulation. In some cases the abductee discovers through regressive hypnosis or memory flashbacks that the aliens projected imagery into their minds while performing medical procedures. For example, while an abductee is undergoing a gynecological exam or sperm extraction, the aliens may project pleasant sexual memories to facilitate the process. Such a dynamic occurred in Sophia's case when, during an abduction-related memory, she was told to relax prior to a rectal exam, while being hypnotically told that Dave was doing the procedure. In the case of Janice and Alex, the aliens instilled dream imagery of a foreplay scene where a desire for sexual contact was instilled into the minds of the love-bite couple. Janice became lucid within the abduction dream, questioning the situation. This then triggered an awareness of the alien-orchestrated scenario, which was experienced as a dream. At that point she blanked out. One of the most common implanted scenes takes the form of an apocalypse or cataclysm. This is so commonly reported that I suspect it is a fundamental insertion dream, a fear process designed to humble and then flatter the victim. In one case a female abductee was taken to cubicle-like rooms in an ultraviolet light setting. She was shown graphic imagery of human war scenes, blood-stained and dismembered bodies. The implied communication during these scenes was, "See what humans are doing to one another. War after war. Senseless killing." The imagery had the effect of upsetting the woman to tears and causing her to be ashamed to be human. The aliens then flatter the victim, by suggesting that he or she was specially selected, singled out to be an emissary. Bo and Peep demonstrated what can happen. Many contacts will have a worshipful adoration for the ETS after their abduction, as if we should follow their lead. Chapter 20 Starseeds. Based on the reports of several contacts, I believe the aliens could be conditioning the public to a naive mindset, a mental state designed to suspend critical thinking. This is especially apparent in abductees and UFO spiritualists who think of themselves as chosen starseeds. In this context, I am referring to the false light starseeds, as opposed to the true light bearers. If one observes closely, the false light can be discerned from the true light. True light bearers are not afraid of exposing the dark and have spiritual discernment. The false light bearers display incongruence in their actions and beliefs, and naively focus on the positivist elements of extraterrestrials, while in denial of any negative alien abduction material, or their own. Or they blame all negative abduction reports on the military and black projects. They lack discernment and may exhibit repressed trauma and duplicity as well. I have encountered more than a few abductees who prefer to call themselves starseeds or contacts. Some contacts have even gone so far as to claim that the extraterrestrials have created the entire human race, which to them explains the differences between Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and the disappearance of Neanderthal during the late Ice Age. In other words, these true believers believe, because it is, after all, an act of faith, that we owe the aliens a debt of gratitude for assisting us in our evolution. This implies that the pyramids could not have been built without them. The same holds for Newgrange and Stonehenge and hundreds of other ancient temples. This idea got started a generation ago when Erich von Däniken brought out his series of highly controversial books with names like Chariots of the Gods. Although hundreds of books came out to poke holes in his pseudo-scientific theories, literally millions of people bought into the idea that the UFOs were here thousands of years ago and that they were influential in ancient societies. His ideas implied that without the aliens the airplane and the radio would never have been invented. Von Däniken was never able to prove any of his ideas, but his theories grew like microbes in the public imagination. Unfortunately, I cannot go into detail explaining all I've been told when it comes to how the aliens control and condition some contacts into promoting their agenda. Many of the control factors that the aliens exert over some abductees border on downright demonic activity with the added twist of high-technology implants. The effect of such psychological warfare tactics is to keep the abductee and public at large at a minimum level of understanding. If the aliens' true nature were to be known, they would lose ground in the spiritual war. I repeat, spiritual warfare, from the aliens' viewpoint, is to drive us away from our traditional beliefs of love, family, and especially our definitions of God, however pluralistic they may be. If the aliens succeed, they place the victims in a constant state of confusion with all manner of conflicting information. It also keeps the abductee in awe of the aliens' apparent high technology and all-powerful intelligence. It seems important for the alien presence to make us believe they are omniscient, when, in fact, they may not be. The abductees are force flies and half-truths aimed at conditioning them into feeling disdain and contempt for their fellow humans. For example, the contactee may feel disgust for humanity's warlike and selfish nature, condemning it in favor of a newfound love and worship for the spiritually advanced extraterrestrials. These peace-proclaiming contacts vehemently oppose anyone who challenges the extraterrestrial agenda, accusing revisionists of being fear-based. I have personally encountered abductees who fear speaking out in public about anything negative, or giving the aliens a bad image. In one case, the abductee was being manipulated through deception, fear and even physical pain, to promote the extraterrestrial space brother propaganda through the internet. Spiritual warfare on the part of the aliens' warfare is exemplified by the love bite itself, and I am sure the aliens have manipulated relationships and emotions for specific purposes. The matchmaking aliens may very well be what our ancient myths spoke about with Cupid and his arrow. In a few cases the love bite experience hit the person over the head like a magic love spell, removing all critical reasoning ability. Alien-induced obsession dramas may occur in the aftermath of abductions in which the sexual energy has been spirited away and diverted to alien use. The experiments and probes used in many of the cases may even to be designed for the harvesting of emotional, sexual, and creative energy. The alien lust for human energy, both pain and pleasure, and the methods they employ, strangely echo tantric Buddhist and ancient Hindu sex practices. In Kenneth Grant's book, Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, the author tells us how Crowley used ancient tantric rituals, known as the Vima Marg, to attain power from sexual energy after prolonged withholding of the orgasmic response. This technique can only be successful through a special woman, a selected love mate, who has the right tantric kundalini match for that priest. This again sounds like what the aliens are doing. The correct selection of the woman is of the utmost importance, as she is the only one who can facilitate the creative energy through a magical tantric sexual union, one that is not necessarily orgasmic, a process also known as karasa. In Hindu lore the connection is also known as yabhyam. This may not even involve physical contact in some cases, but always involves the draining off of the kundalini, or serpent power coiled up at the base of the spine at the Muladhara chakra, the pelvic center. Most Western secret societies claim to have been in contact with non-human intelligences over the years. Aleister Crowley's lamb was described as a typical grey alien. It was this being who dictated to Crowley the Book of the Law. But, Crowley admitted that in order to obtain the power, it was necessary to engage in numerous sexual rituals with a scarlet woman. In other words, in the alien agenda sexuality of many kinds, and specifically sexual intercourse of a mysterious kind, must be performed with a specifically conditioned and selected woman, if the cosmic life force is to be transmitted to the aliens. According to sexual magic practices, if the fire snake, kundalini rising, unwinds too rapidly, or, if the primal power ascends up the spine before all 7 chakras are balanced, the power is deflected and all sorts of neurotic traits develop, most importantly enigmatic obsessions. The natural goal of the kundalini is to reach the mind, Ajna chakra, for a joyous illumination and higher state of consciousness. This experience is usually described as the clear white light realization. You'll know it if it happens to you. Furthermore, it can crumble your mind if you are not properly prepared. Gurus and yoga masters from Patanjali onward warn adepts of the dangers of evoking the serpent energy in a person not properly prepared to receive it. The serpent energy is said to shoot forth venom with poisonous vibrations which can attack the unprepared individual. In Western black magic this process can be used with deadly effects. Materializations of interdimensional beings and demons can, some say, be called into full reality. Faust, forging a pact with the devil, is a case in point. The intake of the venomous vibrations, cynicism, sexual perversion, narcissism and negative thought, can bring any human being into direct contact with the demonic worlds and the lower elementals. Conversely, if done with impunity, the properly trained can direct these currents to transform human consciousness, making awareness possible on many transcendental levels. In Janice and Alex's case, the aliens communicated to Janice that your bonding is no longer useful to us. This response implies that the bonding dramas created are for some temporal purpose, whether for extraction of life essence or creative energy, or to bring certain persons together for a specific reason. Janice, Sophia and Angelina continued to have encounters involving other bonding partners instigated by the aliens. In one event Janice recalled standing in a dark place, close to another man. She could distinctly feel his soul essence and she empathically knew what this man felt like, his thoughts, feelings, and desires, as if he was a part of her. The alien's message during this abduction was, "Remember this person. He will be important." Janice had a dream wherein Eve did not bite the apple, and the snake was forced to move on to some other couple. Not long after this experience Janice met up with the man, but she didn't fully realize the setup until she had the dream flashback. The man in her dream, Adam, wrote Janice a letter 1 week later. They shared similar goals and interests and felt a deep spiritual connection. This relationship has been a platonic friendship for Janice, but became a romantic obsession for Adam. But she was amazed that his name was Adam, a man she met only a few weeks after having a dream about the biblical Adam and Eve. Synchronicity? Maybe, and maybe an implanted suggestion. Another woman described how she believed she was set up with a targeted love bite partner by being sent via out-of-the-body experiences to have astral sex with the intended male. She claimed that after she heard a telepathic trigger cue phrase, she immediately felt a strong passion for the man and made love to him in an OBE sexual melding experience. Within days after the astral sex episode, the targeted partner began contacting the woman, and the two described a strong psychic connection with one another. Coincidence? Could it be possible to create bonds with one another in such a manner? One sad question may never be answered: why couldn't the aliens have just soul bonded the women with their current husbands? That question seems difficult at first, but if we then assume the aliens want us to experience a certain degree of existential pain, and want to lead us away from a kind of innocent happiness, the answer comes quickly. The aliens are exploiting our suffering. Knowing these basic secrets sheds a whole new light on the possible motives of alien behaviors when the sexual element and obsessive love matches are created. Once we focus on the lover's drama, we see how the aliens play the abductees like one big Nintendo game. This may be for the study of human soul energy. As mentioned in the opening section of this book, the aliens seem to be orchestrating a type of psychic rape. Let me end this chapter with a case history drawn from the past. A magical masking process, quite similar to the ones used by the aliens and their human accomplices, was reported in Mallory's Morte d'Arthur, the standardized story of King Arthur, and, in this case, Merlin, the druidic master magician, is the figure who orchestrates the final outcome. When Mordred lusts after Igraine, the wife of King Mark of Tintagel, he falls from power. He becomes obsessed and even psychotic, frightening his family and his most loyal subjects. Not only does Igraine reject him, she tells him he is repulsive to her. Mordred, knowing that, even in pagan times, the rape of another man's wife was a mortal sin, could do nothing but pine away. But eventually Merlin enters stage left and offers to solve the problem. Like Rumpelstiltskin, Merlin promises to cast a spell on Mordred, which will make him look exactly like King Mark, but a price must be paid. Merlin must receive the issue of any said mating. He will take the child away, and Mark shall never know of the horrible replication and trickery undertaken in his absence. Merlin arranges to have Mark ride out for a military mission on the northern border and, during that hiatus, casts the spell that will allow Mordred to appear, as Mark, in Igraine's bedchamber. She willingly sleeps with Mordred, thinking he is Mark returned early from his trip, and becomes pregnant. This then is a case of rape by stealth, psychic rape. As specified in the devilish contract, Merlin takes the child, the future King Arthur, away to be raised as a fosterling. The fact that the great King Arthur is the result of this rape does not justify the deception, but in Celtic myth Arthur becomes the Redeemer, and this justifies the calumny of his birth. The same sequence of events occurs in Irish myth when Dectan is impregnated by a ray of light near an ancient stone cave and bears a son named Setanta, who was subsequently raised by the druid and warrior Conchobar to become the Redeemer hero. Chapter 21: The Alien Redeemer. My research tells me that the aliens and their human benefactors will use any method possible to achieve their goals. One of the most common cover screens aliens use is to pose themselves as the Messiah or Redeemer. This guise also takes the form of any rabbi, teacher, or guru the target person may respect. How could this work? How could an alien fool a devout Christian or Jew? It turns out everyone has a weakness. Some devout people are not fully sure about their faith. It is generally held that the Redeemer, the teacher of righteousness of the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, was sent to atone for what is called original sin, an idea that stretches back into pre-biblical times. Surely, we can see Eve's bite of the apple as a simile for the love bite itself. Both result in emotional disasters. Eve, the apple and the serpent, the temptation of the garden, the great flood, and all of the attendant symbolism is, without question, a vague memory of the events of the Stone Age, possibly even the end of the final Ice Age, known as the Worm Epoch. Those apocryphal legends were told and retold in oral tradition for millennia before they were transcribed into biblical texts recalled by the mythographers of the Bronze Age. The Redeemer archetype arises from ancient animistic religions and winds its way into Judeo-Christian lore by way of specific bloodlines. These bloodlines tend to develop in a priest class known as the Zadok line. Moses was a redeemer, as was Abraham and the mysterious priest Melchizedek, 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 in Hebrew Malachi and even Moloch. Although we could easily use any number of saints and philosophers as examples, it seems Melchizedek, the high priest of the line, is precisely relevant to the love obsession because he is a three-faced figure, a priest, a king, and a god. In this trilateral sense he is the purveyor of the marriage vow, love, honor, obedience. In a Christian marriage he is the embodiment of Father, Son and Holy Ghost, who oversee all Christian vows including baptism, and he represents a perfect picture of the Holy Family, Father, Mother and Redeemer Child. This can be taken to almost infinite extremes, as life, death, rebirth, and so forth. Melchizedek is therefore the priest god, or philosopher king, championed so highly by Plato, a living representative of the one true God, and the repository of all philosophy, an early disguise for the knowledgeable man, the Gnostic mystic known in literature as Hermes Trismegistus. He is first mentioned in the book of Genesis and appears several times in the Torah and the Bible. In every case he is linked to a genetic line arising through David and Jesse, the tree of Jesse. This same line produced the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene, and all of the brethren that surrounded Jesus during his trial and transcendent experience. But the line also continued on long after the era of Jesus, through the living apostles, especially Philip, the sons of thunder. James Boanerges also was known as James the Just, the brother of Jesus, and several others. The tradition of succession in sequence, of passing the torch, of champion defeating champion, emerges from one of the deepest fountains of human understanding. We could not live without competition and challenge, it is what has formed us as humans, and we are vain. The aliens know this and take advantage of our need to excel and to pass along information, perhaps even to become one of the elite or chosen ones. The aliens do nothing more than give us the recognition we crave. The Redeemer screen plays interior to the Starseed drama. To repeat, certain contacts have been promised a place in the future paradise for their blind cooperation now. The program, as it has been told to me several times by totally unrelated people, is designed in a team management model. The Gnostic model works more effectively and against the aliens or any fascist for that matter by teaching individual action within a tribe or cadre. The concept of elitism is almost completely erased, except for the pride one takes in observing the education of others. Old Testament Christians hear a valid echo in the implications that Jesus was an anointed member of this baptizing Melchizedek line. This Gnostic view is gaining popularity. A huge library of texts once buried in Egypt has now been published as the Nag Hammadi Library. But it is important to realize that the aliens have probably read every book we have and thus have come up with a strategy to exploit or explain away any and all forms of wisdom. By this I mean we can be weakened by our best traits. With mystic Christians, Christ and the priest king are synonymous, but Orthodox Jews have very strict tests for the advocation of the Messiah. With strict New Testament Christians, Jesus Christ's name is not based on the concept of a priest king, but rather, the Father Son Holy Ghost, Trinity. But here comes the weak spot, be you mystic or conservative, the results are the same. Both old and new interpretations result in the idea that salvation comes through an intermediary, a Messiah or Redeemer. The aliens apparently see this as an opportunity and can make subtle tweaks to their cover story in order to adapt to a specific victim's belief system. The idea is to get you to see them as surrogate redeemers. If this is true, if the aliens are simply rank opportunists, if they purposefully set out to psychically rape people and cast them into a life not worth living, it tells us a great deal about their spiritual beliefs, i.e., they have none. Maybe they are advanced, maybe in their world there is no concept of God, but in ours there is, and the aliens hold no respect for our beliefs, our gods, or our many different forms of worship. The Redeemer appears throughout the generations in different forms. She comes as Joan of Arc, or he can take the form of King Arthur, Emiliano Zapata, Buddha, Jesus, and many others. In other words, mankind is constantly on the lookout for a Redeemer both in fiction and in real life. Every time we elect a new prime minister or president, we pray that he or she will be someone who will come down to our mundane plane and fight our battles. Democracy is structured as a form of natural mysticism, and that, to me, seems healthy. Sadly for us, the aliens are not interested in our childlike governmental systems. I am a scientist, I thrive on it. But the aliens are a classic example of what would happen if we relied solely on technology and used no other methods, losing our hearts in the process. The aliens seem to have placed themselves in the role of the Redeemer and constantly try to replace our need for redemption, mate selection, sexual orientation, fellowship and tribal life, with their own agenda. Both Moses and Jesus promised that we can lead a just and moral life. The questions are then, why are we still being harassed and manipulated by the aliens? Why have some humans joined them willingly? Why does it seem like the world is still controlled by evil? Perhaps there really is a war being waged in heaven, as prophesied in the book of Revelation. If the aliens are so intelligent and spiritually evolved, or immortal, why would they need the love bite, and why would they need to extract our soul energy? Have they lost their hearts, and a full capacity to love? Aliens cannot be the redeemers because they do not give us anything, they take away energy and give nothing in return. A true redeemer will never take the breath of life, what the Egyptians called the Kansas, away. In Zen, Shinto, and in some forms of Asian military training it is called ki, defined, in Western terms, as awareness. The ancient Celtic warriors practiced a form of meditation which brought them into touch with the Dada, the spirit of awareness of life, the spirit who watches over us, the good shepherd or shepherdess who guards us all, the animistic spirit, which permeates all things. This, in my opinion, is really what the aliens are after. The aliens, especially the reptilian types, need this from us. They apparently have some ability to emote, but they have a disdain for humankind. They cannot love like we do, but they are fascinated by our ability to do so, and they do experience what can only be called anti-love. When human beings lose their ability to love, they quickly die, both spiritually and physically, and it is this life, death, and rebirth process the aliens are, in my opinion, studying. Spiritual warfare took place in the Garden of Eden, and it continues, almost as if it is a condition for life itself. How exactly do the aliens play out spiritual warfare from their point of view? As an abductions researcher and counselor, I have seen people continually victimized by dreams implanted by the aliens, especially erotic and perverted suggestions, encouraging pedophilia and sodomy. Aside from bloodline research, which is beyond the scope of this book, aliens' spiritual warfare follows no racial pattern. No one is immune. African Americans and Caucasians, Latinos and Asians suffer the alien scourge in proportion to the normal distribution of our populations. Christians, Jews, even good people who practice a neopagan life have been abducted and turned into semi-slaves. There are, however, a few selective trends emerging from the growing database of abductee reports. In Christian Gnostic thought, Adam and Eve were created in the beginning to be holy sons and daughters of God, but were thwarted by the ruling archons who fought them with deceit and jealousy. I believe the earth is a spiritual war zone, and when we are in the front lines we may get hit, even if we are good soldiers. Life on Earth seems to be the ultimate testing ground for new spiritual weapons. Even if we do all the right things, prayer, righteousness, etc., we may still experience setbacks and attacks. Some enlightened UFO researchers, such as Brian Levins, prefer to reframe these challenges as necessary fertilizer for true spiritual growth. The covert behavior of the aliens, and those who are their servants, reveals their deceit. They know that if their knowledge leaked out, many future victims would be able to defend themselves. The very name of Jesus Christ and any reference to demons creates a knee-jerk response in the UFO community. Buddha is also passé. Perhaps it is too late, perhaps the aliens have already usurped the power of the Redeemer archetype. Chapter 22 Occult History. There are numerous sources of information that address the parallels of demonology and folkloric tradition with extraterrestrials. My aim here is to address the similarities, and other pertinent observations that I have made in my own work with abductees, rather than quoting literature references. The first parallel is the interdimensional and paraphysical nature of the aliens. Their ability to materialize in our physical dimension out of thin air is a prime example. The apparent telepathic ability of aliens is also reported in demonic and angelic encounters, or even with some very psychic humans. In occult practices such as witchcraft, the witch or warlock will invoke familiar spirits for special knowledge or power, such as psychic ability. These abilities may include precognitive or divination abilities, astral projection, telekinetic abilities and mental control over others. As the witch or warlock gains more familiar spirits, she or he increases their personal power and psychic abilities, accordingly. Many abductees have some sort of clairvoyance and have experienced paranormal and even poltergeist activity in their lives. There is a question about why they tend to have heightened psychic sensitivities after their abductions. It is also known that a great deal of clairvoyance comes from people after they have been frightened and/or had a near-death experience, with or without alien intervention. Something normally happens in the rhinencephalon and the midbrain that heightens our ability to think past our own footsteps. On the other hand, some abductees claim they have been modified. Some abductees have reported the indwelling presence of a gray or reptilian within them. A few have been observed by their close associates and lovers, to have momentary appearance of a serpent being, replete with snake eyes, reptile body, scales or webbed fingers. I believe that these spontaneous shape-shifting observations are paraphysical or psychic in nature. Some very sensitive abductees are able to clairvoyantly perceive the aliens as interdimensional beings, superimposed within certain individuals whom they believe to be hosts. Some abductees, such as Dr. James L. Walden, author of The Ultimate Alien Agenda, describes his experience and identity as a multidimensional or interdimensional reptilian, human hybrid. Walden describes it as having another body, in this case, an interdimensional reptile being, who coexists with him. But instead of a being outside of himself, he recognizes this to be a part of himself, being able to coexist in another dimension or reality. Other abductees have reported that they have found themselves in another dimension as an alien. Sometimes during abductions, they become an alien in the abductions, an alternate identity of sorts, dreams, or in hypnotic regressions. Many have described having a past life as an alien or extraterrestrial. I have spoken with alternative healing professionals who have witnessed the exorcism of alien gray beings out of individuals. In more dramatic cases, I've interviewed at least 3 abductees, who have had reptilian encounters, report reptilian demonic possession ranging from minutes to several hours. In the case of Angelina, her neighbor became momentarily possessed by a demonic being, writhing on the ground, grunting, hissing, and salivating at the mouth. In another case, a male abductee, who has seen reptilians and greys in his abductions, was taken over by a reptile spirit being or fourth-dimensional reptilian, for several hours. He described it as a very frightening, controlling evil force that he had to muster every ounce of willpower to fight this thing and regain control. During the possession, he saw himself, outside and inside his body at the same time, on all fours, in animal-like fashion, growling and hissing, as a reptile would. This also happened in an anonymous abduction case where a drastic personality change transpired. In another anonymous case, the abductee was observed to have indwelling reptilian entities moving through them after a series of metaphysical healing and psychic exercises in a locale, near Sedona, Arizona, known for paranormal activity. These astral pods or alien entities caused the individual to become ill and immobilized until the situation passed. Needless to say, it was very frightening for the abductee. In one of Angelina's experiences, she recalled being taken to some kind of facility, where human military personnel were present. She was told to sit down in a chair and was surprised to witness another alien being, a gray, come out of her body and stand next to her, as the military humans had a conversation with the entity that coexisted within Angelina. She was shocked and had no idea that an entity had been living inside of her. In another case, the abductee was led by extraterrestrial spirit guides to perform certain psychic and healing exercises in a special location, which was some kind of energy ley line area. What may have happened from a metaphysical level is that these psychic exercises somehow led to the opening of interdimensional portals, where the entrance and exit of aliens, reptilians in particular, increased. This increased paranormal activity as well. In many occult practices, the specific reason for performing certain rituals is to create an interdimensional doorway or access point for spirit beings. Once this has been done, the poltergeist activity and alien encounters may increase. This may be what occurs in some haunted houses. In the Ted Rice case, the reptilian creature goaded Ted's grandmother, Grandy, into having sexual relations with the image of her dead husband. What was noteworthy in this account was the reptilian's angry reaction to her protective use of the name of Jesus Christ. Throughout Ted's early life, his alleged spirit guides had a tendency to deter him, and his spiritualist friends from pressing deeply into his alien abductions. Instead, the spirit guides put forth metaphysical explanations. The propaganda line of these spirit guides was to give the extraterrestrial theory a consciousness-raising twist. What Ted discovered in his encounters was quite the opposite. Sophia privately told me that the more she focused on God and closing the doorways of sin in her life, the less frequent her alien encounters became. This implies to me that, at least some of the aliens get off on emotional energies. For example, she believed that the more she obsessed about her love bite partner, sexual fantasies, dwelling on negative thoughts and emotions, the more she was accosted by the alien phenomena, and as soon as she shut down the obsession, the aliens began to leave her alone. Sophia also has reported experiences in which she was able to tell the aliens, Greys, to leave in the name of Jesus, after which they disappeared, like a vapory smoke popping out of thin air. Sophia admitted that the more she was involved in the occult, for example channeling classes, psychic readings and so forth, the greater the frequency of alien and poltergeist activity. She also said that during the late 1980s she was being led telepathically to go to Arizona and New Mexico for a mountain trip, at which time she had abduction-related experiences. Gradually, Sophia learned how to use prayer, counseling and healthy communication skills to decrease the alien activity in her life. Angelina has experienced both alien and military abductions. She, like Darlene, has been a victim of psychic rape by demonic entities and has called upon the name of Jesus and Archangel Michael successfully, yet she still battles the negative entities from time to time. At times, Angelina experienced abductions as an actual, non-dream, physical event in which she was taken through an interdimensional portal in the bedroom wall. Aliens have also been seen entering and exiting the same portal locations throughout the house. She describes the doorway as a dark area, which expands like a black void and will literally pull her through, much like in the movie, Stargate, or The Matrix. During these times, she has heard nondescript voices on the other side, as if it were a laboratory or workshop. On other occasions, Angelina recalls being pulled through an interdimensional portal to another reality. In this extra reality, medical procedures and training sessions took place. Sometimes the aliens or military people would come through these portals into the room. Most often, Angelina would find herself in the new environment after she was brought through the portal in a dream that felt very real. In these dreams she experiences medical procedures and all manner of psychological testing and training exercises. On one occasion, Angelina was so frightened she prayed and recited the rosary. While she was saying the rosary, a human military man said, "That's not going to work. We're not demons." Perplexed, Angelina then decided to test them according to what she recalled at Massachusetts. She asked the man, "Well, did Jesus Christ come in the flesh?" To her surprise the man appeared caught off guard and responded, well, yeah. In a number of encounters Angelina was able to discern humans from reptilians. She recognizes the smell of a reptile as dank and like mildew. She also has been able to discern whether a reptilian was really a shapeshifter in the image of a human. It should be noted here that reptilians have the ability to change their image like chameleons. The reptilians are known to take part in aggressive sexual acts, sodomy, rape, etc. Sometimes it appears to be an act of territorial possessiveness of their victim. There is also a type of reptilian sexual encounter that some female abductees have reported to be sexually stimulating. They have described it as the most arousing type of sex they ever had, resulting in heightened orgasmic response and a raising of their sexual drive to an unnatural degree. At the same time, some of these female abductees have been coerced into the sexual encounter and may be paralyzed during the sex act, although their body may respond. If the female continues to have these kinds of sexual liaisons, they may turn off to human males. In Angelina's case, the reptilian handler acted in possessive ways, so as to prevent her from having sexual contact or desire for her husband. The method of switching off Angelina from her husband included an overt reaction to human male pheromones, and possibly mind control. The reptilian also behaved jealously toward Angelina's husband. It is not known whether this was a true emotion or a masked reaction designed to elicit a response. Some female abductees who have experienced the heightened orgasmic response of reptilian sexual contact also have remarkable clairvoyant faculties. These females report that during lovemaking with their human partners where passion is ignited, they have observed paraphysical, energy vortex swirls in their room. It is as if the sexual energy creates some kind of interdimensional vortex, once their base chakra center has been opened and manipulated by the reptilian being, or in some cases, sexual magic practices. This rare phenomenon could possibly occur in those persons who have had a natural kundalini awakening also.